Welcome back to another video. For today's video, let's go to the beautiful island of Barbados. So it's over a week now since Donald Trump became the 47th president of the United States of America, his second stint on presidency. And I've been reacting to how the Caribbean is reacting to his presidency. And today, we're going to go to the beautiful island of Barbados. And in this video that I want to react to, it's from the Barbados morning show. And a member from CARICOM, a representative from Barbados, his reaction to Donald Trump becoming the 47th president of the United States of America and the impact that his presidency could have on CARICOM, the wider Caribbean. So let's take a look at what he has to say about Donald Trump presidency. Let's take a look.
A big talking point throughout the U.S. election was about the application of tariffs to imports into the U.S. Is there any legislation or any treaties? Are there any treaties in place to be able to protect the Caribbean goods that now go into the U.S.? Or do you believe the Caribbean could possibly be subjected to some of these tariffs that we've heard about?
Yes, well, another big promise that Mr. Trump made in his campaign was that the United States was being taken advantage of by countries sending imports into the U.S. market, and that he was going to impose a tariff. At some points he said 10%, at other points he said 20%. At some points he directed it at China, Chinese products. At other points he spoke about it as if it would be across the board. So again, this is something that has to concern us, because the United States is our biggest, CARICOM's biggest trading partner. And we have something called the Caribbean Basin Initiative, which is a program of the Ronald Reagan presidency. Back in the early 80s, Mr. Reagan established this Caribbean Basin Initiative, under which our countries have a number of the things that we produce here have duty-free access to the U.S. market. And so the question would be, will a Trump presidency be hostile to the continuance of that program, that Caribbean Basin Initiative? Fortunately, the Caribbean Basin Initiative, or CBI, is anchored in legislation. The Caribbean Basin Economic Recovery Act, the Caribbean Basin Partnership and Trade Act, and is in place legislatively until the year 2030. But, you know, the Republicans are going to control both the House of Congress and the Senate, and therefore will be in a position to pass legislation. So this is something that will concern us. Hopefully, the CBI will not be touched.
So the Barbados ambassador to CARICOM covered a wide range of topics in this interview. One of the things that he spoke about was the tariffs. If you remember, in Donald Trump election campaign, he spoke a lot about tariffs and how he feels that America is being ripped off, in particular by China. So tariff is one of the topic that was covered in this interview. And he also talked about the CBI, the Caribbean Basin Initiative that was established back in 1983, and also about the guns coming in to the Caribbean. And that has been a big issue over the years, in particular too. It's playing a big part of the increase of violence now in some of the eastern Caribbean island. So that is just some of the stuff that was covered. But first, let's talk about tariffs. I think it was very clear in Donald Trump's, in his entire campaign and in a lot of the interview that you saw from Donald Trump, some of the long form interview in the podcast with Joe Rogan and the PBD podcast, some of those podcasts, it was very clear that when it comes on to tariff, that the countries that would be affected if Donald Trump goes through with this tariff thing would be mainly like China, I think South Korea to a lesser extent, or I wouldn't say a lesser extent, South Korea, because the making of Samsung phone, Samsung is made in South Korea, so South Korea could experience some of that also with their motor vehicle, and Mexico and Canada with the North American trade agreement. I think like Mexico and Canada should be a bit more worried, but for the Caribbean, I don't think there's any worry at all in the Caribbean about tariff because the reality is that in the Caribbean, in particular Jamaica and I would say Trinidad and Tobago, the manufacturing industry in the islands have been demolished years ago. And it's interesting, like right about around the time when you talk about the CBI, the Caribbean Basin Initiative, like right there in 1983, right around that time, the Caribbean, I remember in Jamaica at the time, we had a thriving manufacturing industry. It was considered like low-paying jobs, but still it provided employment for a lot of Jamaicans, and that was completely wiped out from the 1980s when in Jamaica we used to make like Guess jeans, we used to make a lot of the stuff that you see being made like in China, in Bangladesh and those places, like those stuff used to be made in Jamaica and completely wiped out. So in terms of tariff, I don't think Jamaica have or the Caribbean in overall, because the islands that would be mostly affected would be like the larger islands, like I would say like Jamaica, Trinidad, probably Dominican Republic. Haiti is going through a lot now, so but for the most part, no, I don't think tariffs would affect the Caribbean in any way whatsoever. Okay, so he also spoke about the CBI, the Caribbean Basin Initiative, and just let me give you an idea of the countries that are involved in that initiative. And that was done, signed by, I think, Ronald Reagan in 1983. The countries involved: Antigua, Barbuda, Aruba, Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, British Virgin Island, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Grenada, Guyana, Haiti, Jamaica, and Montserrat. Those are the islands that are part of that agreement. And that agreement is pretty much allowing those islands to send duty-free product into the American market. And most of those items, I would say they're food items. So for example, when you go to a place like New York, you go to Florida and you find like a thriving Caribbean community. In a lot of those communities, like you'll find Caribbean convenience store, Caribbean supermarket. So a lot of the products that you would see, strong Caribbean products like Grace, like Carib beer and those products that are made in the Caribbean, they would ship them to America duty free. So it's a good source of foreign exchange for the islands because, you know, we need foreign exchange whenever we trade in American dollars internationally. So every country pretty much need US dollars to buy oil and to do all of those type of things that would keep your economy running. So the CBI agreement was pretty much like, as I said, duty-free products from these Caribbean islands coming in to America. And do I think it's at risk? Well, with Donald Trump, you'll never know. But I hope, you know, it's not anything that we'd have to worry about, because the Caribbean itself is extremely expensive. I would say in 2024, now when you go to different islands, you find that most of whatever we're consuming in the islands, I would say about 50% of the food, the produce, not produce, but the products, like whether it's like cereal, whether it's rice, whatever is on your dinner table, I would say about 50% of those items are coming outside of the United States of America. And that's why the Caribbean, like food in the Caribbean is so expensive. When you compare the Caribbean region to like Africa, you compare the Caribbean region to like Asia, the Caribbean is extremely expensive. And that is because we get most of our stuff from the United States of America. And as I stated earlier, our manufacturing industry, we did a lot more stuff in the Caribbean, completely wiped out. So I hope that is not something that we'd have to worry about. But as I said, with Donald Trump, you don't know what could happen. But let's keep our fingers crossed that the CBI will stay as it is. And I think it expires in 2030. So we have, 6 more years to go. And it's been expired before and been renewed, I think, twice. So I would not worry too much. But as I said, you never know.
There's been also much talk all around the region about the proliferation of illegal firearms here in the Caribbean. And many argue, obviously, they're not made here in the region. So many point to the flow from the U.S., North America, maybe even south here into the Caribbean. How do you think gun rights? We know that the NRA has strong lobbyists who are even members of the Republican Party, and we see much commiseration, if you can call it that, with them, even in the face of mass shootings and stuff like that in the U.S. They've pledged that they believe that there's a right for guns. How will the application of certain gun rights and the way that's treated in the U.S. impact us here in the Caribbean, to your mind?
As we know, all of the Caribbean countries are reeling from an increase in gun violence, crime linked to illegal firearms, and you're quite right. We don't manufacture these firearms. They're manufactured in the United States and find their way into our countries. And in recent times, the CARICOM has been engaging with the U.S. authorities, with the Biden administration, saying to them, look, it is your gun manufacturers, it is your supply of firearms that is at the core of this very serious problem that is rocking our societies. For example, Mexico recently launched a legal case against the U.S. gun manufacturers, and several CARICOM countries joined the Mexican case. So we have been trying to get the cooperation of the Biden administration to help us to stem the flow of firearms into the Caribbean. Now, the Republicans have this commitment to free access to firearms, that every American citizen has the right to bear arms. And yes, lobby groups like the National Rifle Association are very hostile against any restrictions being placed on access to firearms.
Okay, so the final thing I'd like to touch on one of the things that he spoke about was guns. We all know guns coming into the Caribbean through the Caribbean Sea, and it's been established that about 90% of the guns in the Caribbean today, they're coming from America. In recent times, we have seen an increase like in crime, like in St. Vincent. We have seen it in St. Lucia. St. Lucia, we saw like a curfew for young men of a certain age in St. Lucia in recent times. So it is not just affecting the larger islands like Jamaica, Trinidad, and Guyana. Over the years, like crime in those three islands were like skyrocketed. But now we're seeing in the Eastern Caribbean islands, where some of the smaller islands, as I said, as like St. Vincent, St. Lucia, they are being affected now. But Donald Trump doing something about the gun problem in the Caribbean, I would not hold my breath, because the Republican Party is all about guns, and more guns. And if this has been a problem in the Caribbean for I would say like over 10 years now, especially it getting into the Eastern Caribbean. And none of the parties, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, they have not been able to do anything to stem the gun flow in America itself. So I don't think they're going to do anything to stem the gun flow that's coming into the Caribbean, because America is all about guns, like selling guns, buying guns, just guns every day. So I wouldn't hold my breath about that. Yes, so let me know, where in the Caribbean are you watching this video from? And what do you think? Do you think that Donald Trump, being the 47th president of the United States of America, will have any impact on the Caribbean, whether negative or positive? Do you think the prices in the Caribbean are going to increase under Donald Trump's leadership? Do you think the gun flows are going to stop coming into the Caribbean? Do you think Donald Trump is going to fix that? Or do you think it's going to continue the same or get worse? Sound off in the comment section. Let me know what you think about this topic. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. And remember, peace. I'm out.